So here is my feedback.
Literally, I'm eating a sandwich right now, like, bro. That's so I'm about to respond in another language.
ActMan has just released a video, and it's actually doing incredibly good by the time I'm watching it, which is at number 7 on trending. Pretty crazy for kind of an uninformed video. And it's really ironic since a lot of what ActMan says is actually in the Noodle video. It's sort of part of his character, but he speaks so confidently on this that I felt I needed to respond. ActMan literally says games are too big later in the video. It's actually a chapter title. So I want to assume that he's seen Noodle's video and may even be making this entire thing because of that video. But it's conspiratorial when there's a good chance that it's coincidence.
Wow, this new Star Wars Outlaws game looks pretty great.
That's pretty good.
You know what? Let's check out the official website and see if we can learn more about the... Good Lord, what is happening in there? Pre-order. Get 3 days early access. Pre-order. You want to pre-order the Season's Pass? And get 3 days early access. Pre-order. That's four pre-orders on one screen. Extend Kane's journey with 2 upcoming DLCs? You want to play the exclusive Jabba's Fuckhouse? Pre-order. Unlock exclusive cosmetic pre-order. Are you fucking pre-ordering yet? You know what's funny?
First, ActMan points out 4 pre-orders on Ubislot, but it's really marketing for their Ubi Premium because a $70 purchase one time, which is already plenty, isn't comparable to 18 over a year or even half a year. If you go to Assassin's Creed Mirage, for example, there's not even a purchase button, only a try for free. Riders Republic has a purchase button, but only one. It's almost like there's a lot more pressure for a licensed game to do well when the license is in a state of negative flex, let's be honest. There's also no marketing for Ubi's own games to have their own special edition.
If you go to the Arrowhead Games website and just look at it, there's something special about an Arrowhead game. Games should challenge the creativity of the individuals who play them. We want our games to help forge friendships. And look at that. Not even an advertisement for the Super Citizen Edition.
Arrowhead's website actually just links directly to Steam, which does have its Super Citizen version right below the base game. The Super Citizen Edition is also the price of a normal game, which might be relevant later.
Recently, Ubisoft dropped the story trailer for Outlaws. I watched it, and I felt apathy. As you know,
apathy is death.
I'll be real, I think ActMan played KOTOR 2 and no other RPG since, besides Baldur's Gate 3.
Maybe it was the boring writing, the generic presentation, or the fact that they're directing people towards the $120 version of the game instead of the standard version.
Hello, I like money.
Still, I don't remember the last time I felt indifferent to a new Star Wars game.
I don't know the last time I felt indifferent to a Star Wars game, really? I mean, arguably, the last good Star Wars game was Mass Effect 1, but really, Empire at War. I don't think there's been a good Star Wars game since, but this also begs the question, if ActMan is complaining so much about the new Jedi Survivor 2, what did he feel about Jedi Survivor 1? Especially since the game is literally a sequel.
Here's the question of the day. Why, as a huge Star Wars fan, am I more excited for this and not this? Well, the answer is obvious. It's Ubisoft. But like I said, AAA gaming has been in decline for some time. Meanwhile, indie games have become a spawning pool for creativity and imagination.
My face sort of dropped when ActMan said this, since there's honestly not that much that's really creative about HellDivers 2 in the originality sense. It's combining the concept of Halo ODST drop pods, or maybe Warhammer 40k drop pods, with Starship Troopers and the opening to Terminator 2. Putting that together in a live service is a bit creative, but it's also a lot safer than a top-down twin-stick shooter.
Clearly, I'm not the only one who has felt disillusioned and apathetic towards recent AAA titles. But a lot of people focus on how AAA games have gotten worse. They highlight the obvious: excessive monetization, unfinished products being released. I can't masturbate to this character.
HellDivers 2 is also not the best argument, but there are other indie studios that are greedy and make a lot of the mistakes that ActMan points out. Battlestate Games literally just had their unheard of fiasco, but Maybe ActMan didn't see that before uploading this video. Gaijin had their enlisted Steam screw up and arguably their indie, and tons of indie gacha games that are inherently predatory.
Now, first off, what the fuck does AAA actually mean? But the acronym originally referred to large budget, high profile games developed by reputable studios released by major publishers. You know, Halo, Call of Duty, Warcraft, The Witcher, 50 Cent Bulletproof, Ori in the House, games that would shake the very foundation of the world. AAA games typically have large teams, expensive marketing campaigns, and copious amounts of funding. The term was taken from the credit industry and applied to gaming once the severely obese corporate fat cats realized video games weren't a joke of a business and could actually make more money in Hollywood. For business nobles, AAA meant this is the safest investment you can make to get a return. That's not the case anymore. Today, AAA mostly indicates the aspirations and cost of a game, not how safe an investment it is. But the acronym originally referred to large budget, high profile games. That's not the case anymore. Today, AAA mostly indicates the aspirations and cost of a game, large budget and cost of a game.
AAA still means extremely large budget games, and that's exactly what ActMan says. It's a lot of meandering. Ori in the House and 50 Cent are not AAA games by any standard, it's just memeing. These games also wouldn't really shake anything up. Halo, unfortunately, is not actually as influential in the game dev sphere besides opening up consoles to the FPS market and the control scheme. I wish it would be less influential in the writing sphere, and Call of Duty was being complained about even at the time in 2007, 8, and 9 about being generic, assuming we're talking about Modern Warfare 2 or 3. Sure, you have no Russian, but then you have the rest of the game.
From the 80s to the 2000s, there weren't many games that were commercial failures. It was mostly like failed consoles.
We have seen big flops since the 80s and seen relatively small game studios become too big for their britches. We've also seen massive flops from supposedly good companies. 80s to the 2000s, you have E.T., Zelda CDI, Bubsy, Superman 64, and plenty more games that just did not work out.
As AAA gaming budgets have grown exponentially, we've seen some big-ass flops. Marvel's Avengers, Suicide Squad, Anthem, Redfall, Aliens, Colonial Marines.
We have a lot to go over in his short list. Visually, we have the Modern Warfare remake, which was okay from my understanding, although I didn't play it. Fallout 76, which is not a flop right now. Marvel's Avengers is something I'm totally unaware of, but it's probably bad. Suicide Squad is infamous. Anthem wasn't even an investor push. It was a horrible miscommunication from a directionless BioWare and an eager EA. Redfall was a disaster due to its most seasoned veterans leaving either before or during the project, probably in part due to the Microsoft purchase, but unlikely due to investors. Aliens Colonial Marines isn't even relevant now. Let's be real, that was 10 plus years ago, and had its budget siphoned to make Borderlands 2. Same with The Darkness 2, which isn't referenced here, but it would be referenced in other places, probably. Plus, the biggest issue with Aliens was the British coder who almost permanently messed up the AI code.
And in the last 7 or so years, it also seems like many popular franchises have released what fans consider to be the worst entry in said franchise. Fallout 76, Battlefield 2042, Mass Effect Andromeda.
Fallout 76 is the normie take. It's fine, but Shelter is most of the bad things about 76 jumped up to 11. Battlefield 2042 is weird since it's still in early access, but it's not necessarily a wrong choice. Mass Effect Andromeda did have the worst release, but it also wasn't due to investors. It was EA's tech overlords imposing the Frostbite engine on new people who barely finished training on the old engine.
One of the driving factors behind the decline of AAA games is they've gotten too big. The pants do not fit anymore. For reference, vanilla World of Warcraft was made by a team of about 40 people. HellDivers 2 was made by a team of 100. Over 9,000 people contributed to Diablo 4.
What, 9,000?
Starfield, 7 years in development, $200 million budget.
World of Warcraft in its original state would absolutely not be acceptable today. Apples to oranges and all that. HellDivers 2 is also sponsored by Sony, so if you want to talk about investors, shouldn't you be praising them for investing in Arrowhead? Diablo 4 suffers from most things, but I'm not totally sure. Starfield is a bad implementation of probably good ideas. Same as No Man's Sky, but Bethesda is so resistant to change that unlike No Man's Sky, the problems will likely never get fixed. same as Fallout 4.
AAA games have exploded in size, scope, and cost to an unprecedented level.
Really? Unprecedented? We have the Baldur's Gate 3 issue again here. Why can this relatively new team, they're about 15 years old at Baldur's Gate 3 release, which is pretty big and thrown across the world, make a better game with less staff, less publisher help, well, no publisher help really, less money and less time, make a better product than a team with none of those problems? Just because the worlds are procedurally generated, which doesn't count as real or good work unless those worlds are good, we can really pin it down to bad management, bad leadership, or just a bad knowledge base.
On one hand, a larger team has the potential to create something truly incredible, revolutionary, to realize their greatest ambitions. But this relies on having a cohesive vision amongst many people and the budget and resources to make it happen. However, the more ambitious a project, the more money invested into it, the riskier it becomes.
I don't buy it. Breath of the Wild is a very safe project, but that had a massive budget and was pretty ambitious. Baldur's Gate, Elden Ring, the same. Was Andromeda ambitious? Not really. Risky? No. Still a mess. This may have been true coming from the 80s to the 90s, but nowadays, no way.
Immortals of Avium, a game you probably never heard of, was the debut title for Ascendant Studios. And for some inexplicable reason, the game was given a budget of 125 million smackaroos.
Immortals, I actually have heard of. It looks boring. ActMan couldn't even be bothered to play it to make this video. Its name is generic, and its FPS nature means it's not appealing to the demographic that can accept generic fantasy names. Source, I know it to be true.
Sometimes memes can spit truth. I want shorter games with worse graphics made by people who are paid more to work less, and I'm not kidding.
First off, we have indie games, whose market in total is almost equivalent, if not larger, depending on your standards and region, to AAA games. Do you like Fallout? There are plenty of CRPGs catering to you. Collectathons? Kart racers? Metroidvanias? Plenty. If you think that the meme isn't already happening, then you're out of touch with scrolling down on Steam. Particularly in relation to AAA games, Immortals of Avium is that shorter game with worse graphics, and people didn't buy it. Baldur's Gate 3 is shorter than Dragon Age Inquisition, and employees are probably paid better too, and it'll probably be shorter than Dragon Age 4. And the quality is likely to be higher too.
And it's the exact type of reason why AAA publishers are sticking with familiar IPs and playing it safe. You guys excited for Call of Duty 26 to come out later this year?
ActMan, I know you would switch your opinion in a heartbeat if Call of Duty 27 was half decent.
10,000 layoffs in 2023 and 8,000 more on the way. Over 30 studios were shut down, several games canceled.
This doesn't really help the point trying to be made here. I see Volition in there and Saints Row. Come on. Ubisoft is in there. Me Games is in there, which shut down for reasons I went over in the other video. Besides that, a lot of these just aren't good games, and some of them never even made a game in their allotted time.
The hubris from corporate overlords has uprooted this industry in such terrible ways.
This has been happening since at least I was born. It's the way of contracting in Megacore. Don't sign up with one if you don't like the rules. There's literally a competing and larger industry if you don't like those rules.
Blockbuster game development costs are out of control. According to a study by the CMA, a single AAA game could have development costs between $90 to $180 million, plus $50 to $150 million for marketing.
Funny number go up, yes. What did you want them to do? Feed the poor? House the homeless? Lobby Rhode Island for Kingdoms of Amalur 2? These numbers mostly mean that more developers have jobs.
This is clearly unsustainable. It's like every major AAA game is some massive live or die gamble.
A lot of this is due to low confidence. It's a lot more common nowadays to kill a studio after a flop, but this is for some okay reasons. Largely morale, and because flops usually induce a lot of people who were reliable to quit. Either the leads during because they can't control the direction or don't want to, or devs after for low morale. Fallout 2 was good, and its leads left. Quintessentially, that's what happened to BioWare with each game following Mass Effect 2.
So wait a minute, ActMan. You're telling me AAA games have become a greater risk, but also safer?
That's a paradox, John.
Think about it this way. The bigger the budget, the more employees working on a game, the more copies it needs to sell. Therefore, it has to appeal to a lower common denominator.
This isn't true at all. Super surface level thought process. Heavily monetized games aren't appealing to a lot of people. It's extremely risky. It's called whaling. It's called getting a very high denomination of people who have a load of money and love the IP or characters or whatever so much that they'll pay for everything. Sure, Suicide Squad has 200 players, but theoretically they could be paying a few thousand every month, making revenue like 200K. Still, not enough, but that's a thought process that goes through the heads of marketeers. You know what's not safe? Spending a year making horse balls shrink in the cold, or making 2 years of clay heads and unable to change dialogue. The funny thing is ActMan shows footage of Call of Duty single player, but multiplayer is where it's at. Come on, you know.
Which would you rather play, Back 4 Blood or Deep Rock Galactic? I better see some fucking rock and stone in the comments. But that's the thing. Back 4 Blood is a cheap imitation of what inspired it, while Deep Rock Galactic is a unique twist on the whole 4 dumbasses trying to accomplish something co-op game.
I think it's rude to say that you can't feel the soul of the game. I mean, I also completely agree, but implying that it's not what anyone at the studio wanted when Total Walk didn't have a mass exodus after the game flopped? Like No Man's Sky, the team cracked down and are working on their 4th expansion. If we have a scale, I'd say Back 4 Blood barely meets the vision quota, where something like Starfield is close to a 30 or 40% vision.
In New Vegas, you can literally sell drugs to children. Like that's a real choice you have in the game.
It's pedantic, but you can't sell drugs to kids. It's a gift.
According to Obsidian, Chris Avalon, one of the main writers for New Vegas and KOTOR 2, Obsidian made multiple proposals to develop spin-offs for Fallout and the Elder Scrolls, all of which were turned down by Bethesda. And while we can only imagine the reason why, perhaps it was too risky in their eyes.
Lack of research or understanding again. Fallout New Vegas cemented a divide in the fandom from CRPG and new RPG fans to Black Isle and Bethesda. Plus, Fallout New Vegas shouldn't have been a risk, but Obsidian put a lot on themselves. It almost wasn't profitable. Hindsight is 2020, so we have to look at it from the perspectives, and in 2011, it looked like the original creators were trying to have Fallout blow up in Howard's face, which is sort of what happened, just not due to Chris Avalon or Tim Cain.
Here's another example, Halo Wars 2. Console RTS, pretty niche, but its expansion, Awakening the Nightmare, was the first time in a decade we saw the Flood in a Halo game.
Yeah, that's because the Flood story has been told. 343 is just really bad at creating new things. So there's this excitement around the Flood coming back, sure. Has anyone actually played Halo Wars 2? I've only ever seen trailer footage be used in these videos.
Why haven't the Flood appeared in the main series? Don't want to risk lowering the sales with an M rating, right? M-rated games don't sell too great.
Actual schizo ramblings. Halo Reach and 4 is rated M and has no Flood. If you go to the ESRB website, it seems that the ESRB now has an online interaction ratings in place or they don't seem to care about Infinite or 5's rating. Do the basic amount of research. Also, the exception proves the rule here. Only 2 games on ActMan's random list are rated M, 2 are T, and the rest are E. If I were to glance at this list, knowing what those games are, I'd say you have a few ways of making something hyper successful. Allow all sorts of creativity, make it hyper competitive, or casually competitive with a team, or make it just plain direct fun. Which a lot of the games ActMan cites, like Halo or Fallout, kind of fail at now. Actually, where is Skyrim? What is this list?
What if they took one of these $150 million AAA budgets and made a couple of $20 million bets with them, right? And just funded a bunch of projects, and the risk is much smaller. And I think that would be very good for the industry. And I wish AAA would take more risks like that with smaller teams. Then you would get that cohesion. You would get that sort of singular vision, I think, and stronger creativity out of it.
I at least understand this for Rockstar because their games are so overhyped. If they released a sequel that you thought was a 9 out of 10, that would feel disappointing. And that's why indie and AA gaming is thriving right now, because they can take risks.
Here's a question. Is something a risk if it's good and successful? Is that not just safety performed? Is it only a risk if no one expects it to be good? If no one expected it to be good, is that not just stupid? Or is it only if executives don't like the lead dev's idea? Then why would they even hire that lead dev? So then if something is safe and it's good and makes money, why do we not see a Halo with 12 levels of linear but good gameplay? That'd be safe and make money. Halo Infinite added openish worlds, which is a risk, and plenty of people told them not to do it. It's a risk and people don't like it? I thought that that's against what ActMan was saying.
The developers of Palworld were like, well, hope this doesn't make us go bankrupt.
Palworld was developed on Pocket Change. They didn't want to be bankrupted by Nintendo lawsuit.
Indie studios are operating at the level that AAA used to. And when you don't have to make hundreds of millions of dollars to keep your company afloat and not fire your entire studio, you can take risks.
Immortals of Avium was that developer's first project. They should have scoped down and not used their entire allotment if they thought they couldn't have made the game, but they took a risk. Do I have a different definition of risk? Am I the lobotomite?
There's this trend of indie developers reassuring customers that they're not gonna nickel and dime us. No, there are no in-game purchases in our game. We believe in providing a complete and immersive gaming experience without the need for additional purchases. Vermintide 2 is one of the only games to do loot boxes right, because they didn't sell them. At the height of the loot box craze, no less.
Let's be real, Vermintide 2's loot system sucks. Sure, it didn't sell loot crates when it could have, but it's in the neutral state of having a mid-system. When something is positive, you praise it. When something is negative, you berate it, but...
HellDivers 2 doesn't let you pay for tiers in the Freedom Passes. Indie developers can afford to be more player-friendly because they don't have these investors hanging over their heads and these massive budgets.
Arrowhead absolutely has investors hanging over them. It's literally marketed and published by PlayStation, a Sony LLC. They do. Please go to their Steam page.
They want to make easy money, so what do? Bingo! Flood the market with shitty remasters. Boy, there's been an abundance of these lately. Did you know that at one point Warcraft 3 Reforged had like 3 people working on it? Like one guy was supposed to remake all of the cutscenes? And this is so perplexing. These studios dump 10 figures into a new game but can't even hire 10 people to make a decent remaster. It's like there's no middle ground. It's either no budget or dump the bank account. Meanwhile, Lethal Company, made by one guy...
This is a self-defeating cut. Do I have to explain? Yeah, oh, okay. You can't devalue the productivity of 4 guys, especially when Blizzard has less than 40 people work on Warcraft 3, according to you. Then overvalue the perseverance of one guy making a new thing, but relatively simple. Come on.
Development of Redfall began in 2018 as parent ZeniMax was quietly looking to sell itself and was encouraging its studios to create games as a service projects like Overwatch. Microtransactions were intensely encouraged. One of the problems with trying to develop Redfall service early. Firstly, management kept offering the game should be, resulting in development confusion about what they were creating. How to reconcile single player and multiplayer within arcade games never really resolved either. Secondly, arcade employed fewer than 100 people, which added enough to a single player game was not enough for developing a multiplayer game with microtransactions to manage. Outsourcing work to other studios was reportedly not enough to alleviate strain. As a result of putting morale in the direction, different employees left the company. Each role, so about 70% of staff ultimately leaving Arcane. Redfall is not the only story at the time. If you look at most AAA flops or AAA games, it's really disappointed. And you'll find something similar. Management interfered. Management wanted this. I imagine they feel they have to micromanage these things.
Splitting hairs or skipping along, we have to talk about Redfall and Microsoft's management. Microsoft is notorious for not exerting enough control on development, typically leading to development hell, such as the case in Halo Infinite, State of Decay 3, Cyberpunk 2077, which they did have a hand in sponsoring, and likely what's going on with the next Gears of War game. People with power and ideas tend to leave Microsoft to make their own thing, leading to a lack of strong creative visions and resisting management's ever-changing direction. Tim Cain talks about this with Temple of Elemental Evil being harassed by wizards, Fallout being harassed by the GURPS people, and his own art director in WildStar that generally lacking a strong lead tends to trend into incoherency.
Again, because of the investment. Sometimes with AAA games, it feels like there's too many cooks in the kitchen, and Gordon Ramsay is pissed. There's gotta be a happy middle ground in dev team size.
This is the gamer looking for the perfect solution when there's hundreds if not thousands of studios to purchase from that meet your expectations and requirements. Some studios will want to be big and some will want to be small and all sizes everywhere. The Bethesda team actually isn't even that big. The problem tends to be their outsourcing to contractors in Starfield and a bad knowledge base in Fallout 76.
These big dev teams, especially when they're spread out against multiple studios across the country, can sometimes have very inefficient communication, bureaucracy. Next, Battlefield has the largest development team so far. 1 year later, former DICE dev says 2042 never stood much chance being great at launch. There's a video by Timothy Cain, the creator of the original Fallout, about game development caution. And he talks about how certain things in game development now that could be fixed in 45 minutes now take 4 weeks.
When we were making the Outer Worlds, the combat AI wasn't really in yet, so I asked for a very simple combat aggression code to be added. This is how simple it was. Every time an NPC got shot, they would see if that person was on the list of someone who'd shot them. If they weren't, they'd add them to the list with the amount of damage they just took. If they were already on the list, they'd just add the amount of damage they took. Whenever they're deciding who to attack, they attack the person at the top of the list. That's it. That's all I wanted. The programmer who it got signed to came to me and said, I need 4 weeks. And I'm like, why? Walk me through what you're going to do. And he goes, you don't understand. And I was like, I've coded this 3 times. Walk me through it. And he wouldn't. He left. He left angry. Lead programmer came back, started yelling at me, saying, if he says he needs 4 weeks, he needs 4 weeks. And I'm like, then I will do it. I'll have it done before lunch. And he said, no, because then people will have to support your code. I'm like, I'm going to walk you through what I want. And you tell me why this takes 4 weeks. He looked at what I wrote, which was about 10 lines of pseudocode on a whiteboard. And he goes, I'll come back. He came back about an hour later and said, what about 2 weeks? And I said, do I have any options here? Fine. 2 weeks.
This gets cited in a lot of videos I watch for some reason. This sounds entirely like a misunderstanding between Tim Cain and his programming staff. As a programmer who has to adhere to other people's standards, there's bureaucracy and red tape and all kinds of obstacles, but mostly there's misunderstandings about requirements, and Tim wanted something non-standard. His problem probably would have been solved if he just had a GitHub branch, but it's not like that's flowing into all the mines 110% of the time.
You want to fix these lines of code? That decision has to go through 10 fucking departments now. It needs to be approved by your manager, by your manager's manager. It has to go through the marketing team, the DEI office. The fucking janitor's cousin has to approve it. Indie developers don't have the same level of bureaucracy.
Obsidian was mostly independent for the development of the Outer Worlds and was not adhering to Microsoft for almost all of it.
Without the fucking HR department breathing down your neck. Then you also have to make games that can be released in China. You need that China money. It has to hit certain quotas and scores on diversity, equity, and inclusion to secure funding.
Both of these are usually in mind through all of development. DEI isn't often a post hoc thing and is cited as to why writing, which is done before the game is made usually, is not so good. Theoretically, I think you can make a good game while adhering to DEI principles, but that being said, I don't know of any that are funded by DEI and have good stories, though I could literally just be unaware.
And a game needs to have microtransactions for this consistent revenue source, a live service business model, so that makes the investors happy. And can you see how creativity dies in this environment?
No. The conclusion is a summary of everything that's already been said, so I'm not going to go through it. I think any substantial point that ActMan wants to make is disproven easily. I hope ActMan improves, I guess. My suggestion would be to make this sort of thing on a second channel, but we've seen how successful this video is. He is the Call of Duty of YouTube, and I don't know. Get better before you have to pay the phantom tax. Links to all my citations in the description. Personally, the reason I think the AAA environment is stagnating and more seemingly bad games are coming out than good ones is a fear of the past and a doctrinal want to get rid of powerful middlemen. There are only executives and lackeys. Well, and management, but they don't count. I think this is most exemplified in Kojima versus Howard. Both want to have messages about war, but Kojima strives to make every aspect good. Howard has always been distracted. Fallout 4 by new mechanics and trying to one-up New Vegas, 76 by multiplayer and the rapidly expanding company, Starfield by work on other things on the Fallout show and Indiana Jones. That's not the only reason, but a coherent and full vision has obvious benefits that often aren't met. I haven't played through Baldur's Gate 3, but it obviously has a core vision visible through each game previously, with the exception being the bad one. It needs to be balanced. Too much on that visionary, you get a mighty number 9. Too many lackeys, development hell. Too many executives, spreadsheet-style monetization. The downsides are less obvious to each category. No central vision, by the numbers game, or messy bloated game. No hands coding, no product or a buggy one. No executive, feature bloat, or arguing team. True? I don't know. It's what I feel. The final bitter pill to swallow is that some people just have bad visions. Some programmers and artists aren't very good. Some executives can help the development of a game. So this is an update a few days later, and I'm feeling a little sick, but like an addendum to the thing, so I'm sorry if I sound weird. ActMan repeatedly insinuates, and I think directly implies that HellDivers 2 and Arrowhead are indie, but they have recently just been forced by Sony to force players to start a Sony account or link their Sony account, which if I know ActMan's already made his video, so it's all post hoc, but if this isn't indie, I don't know what is.